My first guest tonight has been called a feminist provocateur, and she calls herself a working-class intellectual. She burst onto the public arena with the publication of Sexual Personae in 1990. Her latest book is an equally opinionated collection of essays called Vamps and Tramps. Tonight, Camille Paglia joins me from the CBS television station WCAU in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Camille, thanks for coming on, and welcome to our program.
Well, thanks a lot, Tom. It's great to be here. I've been watching you since 1973.
Well, the last time our paths crossed was backstage at the Conan O'Brien program, which is the 85th mention of that program tonight here on CBS, and it's a pleasure we could finally get together. In reading about you this afternoon, I learned that you are a professor of humanities in Philadelphia. Could you define for all of us watching, what are humanities these days?
Well, it's really the liberal arts. It's literature, the painting, film, television. I teach a wide variety of things.
But in the teaching of this wide variety, does your point of view on human relationships, human sexuality, and the place of men and women in society come across to these young, fertile minds in your classes?
Oh, I think a lot of my theories are drawn from my students. I have very close contact with freshmen, and so I'm very aware of the disaster of the young romantic lives of my students in this age following the appearance of AIDS on the world landscape.
I was going to ask you, for the differences in the disaster of young romance between this time and our time, or I'll say my time, not our time. One obvious difference is the AIDS situation. What else is different in the 1990s in young romance?
Well, we girls of the 1950s were trained to be virgins. We could hold out and not lose the interest or the respect of young men. And I'm afraid that we who created the sexual revolution bequeathed a kind of anarchy to the young. So I think there's tremendous pressure on the young. They don't know whether to be sexually free or abstinent, and there's a kind of melancholy, I fear, over their lives.
People who have read your books, people who have seen you lecture or appear on television, know that you are anything but politically correct. You have been quoted as saying that you are pro-abortion, you are pro-drugs, you are pro-pornography, you don't mind snuff films. How do you keep going in this age of, if I made a misstatement with the last one, please correct me.
Yeah. No, I'm not pro-snuff films. I simply am saying that there were a lot of feminist establishment prudes who were hysterical about snuff films, which are non-existent. Every attempt to find an actual snuff film has failed.
I'm sure you've been asked this before. In a time when people talk about personal choices being made personally, how can you go public and say, look, I'm for abortion, I don't think pornography is harmful, I don't think that drugs should be kept illegal, I think they ought to be legalized. When you put that position out, I would think that a lot of people would say, turn her off.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a radical 60s libertarian. I believe that the government has no right to intrude into the private realm. I find this consensual sexual behavior and drug taking part of that private realm. At the same time, I think that anyone in a position of responsibility, a train driver, a truck driver, should submit to voluntary testing.
Now, people who have read of you know that you were brought up Catholic in America, Italian Catholic in America. It might be said that your very liberal views, your outspokenness is somehow a backlash against your Catholic upbringing. You're nodding your head. Yes, you recognize that question, or yes, it is kind of a backlash?
Oh, no, there's no doubt that I was raised in the very repressive and conformist 1950s when American Catholicism had the Legion of Decency. You remember there was like a code.
Sure.
I remember so many films were condemned and so on. There's no doubt that my work is a reaction to the Catholicism of my youth.
And when that was being handed down, I remember going on Sundays to church and the priest would read the list of motion pictures which the flock was not allowed to see. What did your parents say to you about that, if you had questions about that? Were your mom and dad true believers in the faith, 100% right down the Vatican party line?
Oh, yes. My parents are very religious, and I have a cousin who's a nun. There are many, many people in my family, my background, who are abbesses or sextons, or there's a bishop and so on. And 100 years ago, I would have been a nun. I'm practically a nun now. I think that no, I'm part of the 60s rebellion against all those old-fashioned moral codes.
We've read about your bisexuality.
Yes. Yes, I'm an open lesbian. I'm coming up on a 2-year anniversary with Allison Maddox after a 10-year drought in my sex life. I'm very happy now.
How would you describe the difference in male-female sexuality versus or as opposed to or as compared with female to female sexuality?
Well, I think that men and women are perpetually at war. They will never fully understand each other. I think that a lot of the problems between the sexes, feminism has falsely blamed on men, when in fact there is I think there's a real brain difference. I think women understand each other. I think the level of conversation and intimacy is very intense. But I worry. I don't want a universal homosexuality as an answer to the present alienation between the sexes.
What would be the answer to the present alienation? And as a lesbian now, as you say, an open lesbian, I suppose, as compared to a closed lesbian, although I don't know what that might be. Do you have any respect for men, for what men do, for what they're all about, for the way they think, for whatever they've accomplished or have not accomplished?
Yes, this is why I got in trouble with the feminist establishment 5 years ago with my first book, Sexual Personae, because I talk about the great achievements of male culture, not only the great artworks, but the superb technology from automobiles to the George Washington Bridge. And I said that I was sick and tired of women complaining about men all the time. I come from Italian culture where there are strong women and strong men.
The reason that they see me laughing here, and you would see me if you were in the room with me person to person, I can just see you and a bunch of your pals, women friends, sitting around a table saying, "But by the way, fellas, nice job on the George Washington Bridge." I thought that was a nice touch. But anyway,
Right.
I'm sorry for the interruption.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel that my independence as a modern woman is predicated on male achievements, the appliances, the automatic washer and dryer. I remember that my grandmother scrubbing clothes for 10 children on a washboard in a tub on the back porch.
One of the theories that you don't buy into, which also created a rift between you and the feminist leadership in this country, you don't buy into the position that women in this country have been victimized by men and they lead their lives as perpetual victims. You don't buy into
Yes.
that at all.
Yeah, I despise the victim-oriented nature of establishment feminism. I think that's a terrible heritage to bequeath to young women. I do not see history as nothing but male oppression and female suffering. I believe woman is the dominant sex, in my view.
How so?
Well, I think that woman rules the sexual realm by virtue of her power of procreation, and that most men know how much more powerful women are than they are. I have said that men stagger from control by their mothers to control by their wives.
It is certainly a truism that women control the sexual equation. Mm-hmm. It is not the male pursuit that decides when or not sexuality will take place, but rather when the woman decides that it will take place. So in that sense, there is that kind of control. Mm-hmm. In your observations about men, and I want you to wait till after the commercial because I have to do this break, but I want to ask you here how you have seen men exhibit, well, there are some obvious ways that men exhibit their rage. I think a lot of men are really steamed about this control. They feel, as you say, they've been controlled by their mothers, by their teachers as young boys and young men. In many cases, these teachers are female. And now, as they grow into sexual maturity, women control when and how that sexuality can express itself. We will continue with Camille Paglia and all of you at 1-800-952-2788, all you vamps and tramps out there in TV land. We'll be right back after these messages.